So you just got home with your brand new board game. It's got lots of fancy miniatures, all sorts of cool components, and as you're opening it up and taking a look at everything that comes inside, you find that some of your miniatures aren't quite right. That sword is bent, maybe at a 90-degree angle. The model is leaning too far forward, or heaven forbid, one or two of the models is actually broken. Today on Gardening with ADHD, Gaming with ADHD. If you want to check out my gardening channel, um, you know, I'll put a link to it in the description. But we're not here for plants and bees and all that crazy stuff. We're here for miniatures and board games. So if you want to know a couple of tricks on how you can go ahead and fix the models yourself, as opposed to waiting for the manufacturer to get back to you, I'll show you some nice simple tricks you can do to keep the models or get the models into a great working condition. So let's get into it. So the first thing that I want to start with is just showing a couple of tools that I do recommend that you have if you don't have them already. They're very easy to acquire. And the first of these is some flush cut snips. These are very easy to find at any kind of a modeling or hobby shop, or just straight off of Amazon. They're very inexpensive. And the advantage to them is that they have a flat edge, so that when you're cutting things off of a model sprue, it actually will come out with a much cleaner cut. Now, we're not going to be cutting models today, but we will need these when I show you how to fix a broken model. The other thing that you might need is called a pin vise. Don't ask me why it's called a pin vise. It just is. Basically, it's a small handheld drill that you can use to put holes into your model for putting in what's called a pin. A pin is a small piece of metal, plastic, some other material that you will use to help create your joint when you're putting your models together. So, with that said, let's switch over to the hobby table and take a look at what we've got here. So, the first one that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you how to fix a bent model. So, I have here I believe it's the Praetorian Behemoth from the Brotherhood expansion of the Mutant Chronicles Siege of the Citadel board game. And I chose this guy because if you look at his sword, it's got a rather pronounced curve in it. Now, in most cases, this isn't a big deal. If it's not a big deal to you, you can ignore it and just play with it as is. Obviously, it's not a game changer. But if you're like me and you'd like it to actually look like a sword, nice and straight, you can use this trick to go ahead and fix it. So I have 2 cups of water here. One of them was microwaved for about a minute and a half to get the water to near boiling. You don't actually want bubbles coming out of it. You just want it very, very hot. Over here, I have a cup of ice water. And the reason I have these 2 cups of water is that I'll use the hot water to soften the model and get it to a point where I like the shape. And then I use the cold water to actually lock the model back into place. So all you have to do is take your model and in this case just submerge the portion that's bent. If the model is, say, leaning over, so the entire model has issues, you can submerge the entire model. In that case, I would recommend like a pair of pliers or something else that you can use to hold onto the model without actually putting your fingers into the hot water. Don't hurt yourself, everybody. But you give it about 30 seconds, and then as you can see, the model is a lot more pliable. So you'll get it into position, and then in this case, if you need to, you can follow it into the water. So I'm going to take the model, and I'm just going to stick it into the ice water. And you give it a couple of seconds, and it's back to the shape that it was when it came out of the mold. So, obviously, looks a little bit better. As another example, I have this Brotherhood character, and the spear that she's holding, for some reason, didn't come out straight. I point this out partly because if you look on her cloak, you'll see that hole there. There's no matching hole on the other side, so it was used for something, and in this case, there's this little nub right here on the spear, which I believe was supposed to actually sit in that to hold it in place more straight. So as you can see, her spear, looks more like a bow, like she's going to start shooting some arrows with it. So we can use the same trick to actually fix this spear and get it straight. Now in this case, I'll have to submerge her a little bit more than I did the other guy, but that's kind of what happens with the way it's positioned. So give it a couple of seconds. Notice how flexible and easy to bend that is. We'll hold it in place and dunk it in the ice water. And now, as you can see, that spear came out perfect. So what I will do later is I'll actually, once she's dry, I will go ahead and put a little bit of glue on the spear to actually hold that rear end in place. But for the most part, I'm perfectly happy with this. Came out nice and straight, nice, and it'll look great on the table. All right. So the last piece is the unfortunate broken model. Now, this is where the pin vise came in. I actually pre-drilled this hole, but I found approximately the centerpiece of the model. And in this case, I actually used a regular house drill. If you are slow, if you are careful, it is a viable alternative as to buying a new tool. In my case, I don't know what happened to my pin vise. It's probably up in my office. We don't want to talk about that. So, I drilled a small hole in the base. Now, I can also show you I drilled a hole in the model itself. This case, though, I didn't quite get it as centered as I did on the other, which can be an issue. But for what I'm going to show you, it won't. Now, that pin that I spoke to about earlier, in this case, you can use most anything. You can use a paper clip. In this example, I'm just going to use parts of a staple. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your glue. I like, cyanoacrylate super glue. You can find this again at most hobby shops. I got this at my local game store quite a while back. I like getting large bottles. They'll last a long time. But you'll take it and just put a dot of glue on top of that hole that you've drilled. Now, I already cut off a piece of the staple. And you just push that into the drilled hole. And it will stick up just a little bit. Doesn't need a lot. Basically, think of this sort of like rebar. In this case, I'm going to use my snips. I'm going to get another piece of staple. Since the staples are made out of steel, I do recommend cutting farther back on your snips. Keep the any damage that it may cause to the snips towards the back, as opposed to the front, where you may be using it on other models. And we'll go ahead and we'll tuck him in there as well. Now, most brakes, and in this case, it's not really going to show up on camera, but as you can see, it's a little bit curved. So I already predetermined how exactly the model would fit on the brake. And so once you've got all of that in place, you will... I did not get that deep enough, so we will trim that down. No, it's almost like I should have rehearsed this first. But you then press it together. In this case, my pieces of staple going into each side. Now, if it's taking a little while to cure, you can use this. This is an accelerant. And just spray a tiny bit into the area that's being glued. Give that a second, and it's nice and secure. So, there we have it. I've now fixed 3 models out of my game. If you notice, the curve is still out of the Behemoth. Do keep in mind, sometimes the hot water trick, the models will return to the bent shape. But all you have to do is try it again and shouldn't have any issues. So, thanks for watching. If you've got any questions, comments, tips of your own, feel free to put it down below. And if you haven't, please do subscribe to the channel. And we'll be putting out, more stuff as time goes on. Thanks for watching. Bye.